time. Okay. So, there's somebody, Eric Uslander, who says that inequality matters to trust. That basically, we are privileged to be able to live in a trusting society, and not all societies are trusting. There's variation in how much trust there is in a society, and inequality matters to trust. So basically, if you have a country that has high inequality, right, a few rich people with lots of stuff and lots of poor people, right, and some people in the middle, right, that this kind of inequality undermines the formation and the social production of a generalizable trust in others, right? This basic attitude where you're like, well, are people generally good or are people generally bad, right? And if you live in a place with low inequality, right, more people think, oh, people are generally good. I can trust people. I can leave my door unlocked. I can leave my kid to play in a playground while I have a cup of coffee. I don't need to be right there minding them. That this trust in humankind, right, is a product of social ties that are created, a product of lived experience where people find that outcomes are mostly positive over time, and that high levels of inequality disrupt that process of trust formation. Right? That living in a place where, well, things don't always work out okay for you. That, in fact, you can work hard and not make it most of the time, and the people around you are doing the same things, and things aren't generally fair. That undermines this general trust. And what happens when people live in that kind of setting is that, not that they don't trust anyone, right? But that they change over from this general trust in just people are good in general, mostly things work out in general, to a specialized trust in the people that I particularly know, right? Well, I can trust my mom, and I can trust my sister-in-law, and I can trust my neighbors because I know them, but I don't have a general trust of people in the world, right? So Uslander calls this a specific trust, right? A specialized trust. It means that you have a distrust of outsiders and a trust of the people that are connected to you. This, as you can start to see, creates an us versus them kind of worldview, right? This kind of, well, I don't think that things work out in general, but I think that I know who's good and who's bad. It's the kind of thing that fosters my group is the okay group, and those other groups that are out there are untrustworthy or wrong or bad, and it creates the conditions for scapegoating. Why on earth would homosexuality be the issue that is on people's mind, right? It seems unconnected at all. But it looks like, since we know that inequality is affected by the level of inequality at the national level, it seems like there's got to be some mechanism between that level of inequality and our actual lived experiences and how we process our thoughts and our ideas and our values. And so it seems to me like the best explanation for this is this idea of generalized or specific kind of trust. Okay, so let me just wrap up a little bit. Basically, we know that inequality does matter. Right? And so one of the things, this actually has a policy implication, right? Because one of the things that is an unintended consequence of creating policies that produce high levels of inequality, right, is that it's also you're going to live in this distrustful, this intolerant society, right? And so the path toward tolerance doesn't just include education, but it also includes good social policy, right? Also, the GDP doesn't explain everything, right? The post-materialist thesis should take inequality into account, right? A rich country benefits mostly people in the richest classes, and it doesn't necessarily filter down to everybody, okay? And we know this because we saw that attitude difference by class. And we also know that the overall level of inequality as we get into these new neoliberal social policies where tax cuts for the rich are the rule and where welfare policies are being undermined, that this isn't only going to produce more poverty, and it's not only going to produce more inequality, but it's also going to have this cultural effect as well. That the social structure is going to affect how much tolerance, in this case toward homosexuality, but I think probably we can think about how this might produce more tolerance in general. It matters to overall levels of our cultural ideas and things that seem very different from tax policy, for example. Okay, so that's all I have to say, and I'm happy to take more questions at this time. It's hard for me to see, so wave around a little bit if you have a question. Okay, yeah.
All right. With homosexuality being more justified, did you say that we are encouraging the children of today to have an option?
An option to
be heterosexual or homosexual?
Well, wow, that's a really big question. That's a really big question. It goes to basically what the sort of causes of being lesbian and gay are, and whether it is an option or choice or something that is biological. And you know, the answer to that question right now is we don't really know what the causes are. Whether socially tolerant places produce, you know, more gay people because of it's an option, or if that it's just that there's biological causes to homosexuality that then, you know, there's just a set amount of people everywhere that are lesbian or gay and they're just either in the closet or they're out. Yeah, that's something that social science doesn't know yet. Yeah.
When we looked at that non-manager and like non-professional, what was it? Like,
routine non-manual.
Routine non-manual. Would you say that maybe a lot of their tolerance is due to the fact is that they have stronger policies set in effect for like harassment and all those other things? Would you say that could be a contributing factor to it as well too? Is why they're so much higher up on the schedule? Scale.
On the scale, right? Because it isn't going to be income that sets those people apart, right? I think that, I mean, it's an empirical question. We would have to go back and test, but I think that that's an important insight. Because those workers are going to be more likely to be in offices, and offices are going to be more likely to have these kinds of human resources, non-discrimination policies, and that might have kind of an educational effect in the office place of what's, you know, what kind of attitudes are appropriate. That, like in a manual work site, like a construction yard or a factory, there might be less of those policies. And so, you know, I think you're probably right, but the question is an empirical one, and we would have to get more data to find that out. But yeah, I think so. It seems, sorry, I could always answer forever, so you can cut me off if why not. But we do see that effect, for example, in like sexual harassment policies. That we see the attitudes about sexual harassment changing after policies are put in place in the workplace. And then people become less tolerant of harassing behaviors than they were before the policies were put in place. So there's some evidence to suggest you're right. Yeah.
Anybody else got anything?
It's hard for me to look into the lights, so it's hard to see.
Wait.
Okay, I'll give you next. Okay.
So, like, just for example, like you were saying that, you know, with the whole harassment thing, like, do you think that a lot of, like, how we change our views, like, towards things just kind of comes from, like, a general kind of push from something else? I had it all worked out in my mind entirely.
Well, what we know, right, we actually know quite a bit about this. We know that, you know, things like individual personal experiences do matter. Social factors like gender, marital status do matter. But also these things that might not be so intuitive, right? It's easy to see how education leads to tolerant attitudes, right? But it's very difficult to see how GDP or how overall levels of inequality matter to attitudes. But the truth is they both matter, right? These sort of individual social location and individual experiences matter, but these large-scale social structures matter too. Yeah?
I'm not sure if the same question, but I'm looking lately at popular culture and the increased tolerance for hardcore pornography. And I'm wondering materialistic thinking.
Right.
I see a disconnect. Like, I see that we have more policies in place regarding sexual harassment. We have more laws to do with sexual assault. We have more protection in this country, but I'm not seeing in popular culture corresponding shift with attitudes improving
Right.
towards the degradation of minority groups. So I just
Right.
can't wrap my head around it.
It's a puzzle, right? And it's a question that it would require more research, right? But the puzzle is like, if we know that post-materialism produces more attitudes that favor a broadened women's roles, right? And that a favorable outlook on women's equality, right? But that in those countries we also see more, sexual objectification of women, right? That's a question. That's a puzzle. That's something that, as far as I know, nobody's really addressed. But it's something that for future research, really. Yeah. Any other? Am I missing somebody? Thank you.
Okay, everybody. I would like to say thank you to Tina for coming today. Thanks again, Tina, for coming and for enlightening us about changing attitudes associated with homosexuality. And thank you to all the students and also other professors who came to hear Tina's talk today. We really appreciate you supporting the series. Our next presentation is on November 11th, and it will be on talking about the power of relationships. So again, please come on out, and thanks again for attending.
Thank you so much.